everyone, welcome to Unacademy. This is Astha Raut, your educator, and I'm doing my post-graduation in English Literature from Ramadevi Women's University, Bhubaneswar. So this is the last lesson in this course that we are going to do. It's an overview of Coleridge's work and his life, few of his defects and fragmented work. I hope you like it, and do not forget to follow me on Unacademy. I hope you had a great time. Thanks a lot.
Coleridge's beginning. Wordsworth and Coleridge were most intimate friends. The development until the time of their meeting offers great analogies. Coleridge, like Wordsworth, went through a phase of revolutionary ardor. His first poems are imitative in character. He begins by imitating the artificial style of the 18th century, and the themes of his early poems are those of pre-Romanticism. His handling of supernatural was a part of the Romantic revival. If Wordsworth presents that side of Romantic revival which is best described as the return to nature, then Coleridge has justification for the phrase "Renaissance of wonder." He revived the supernatural as a literary force, emancipating it from the crude mechanism which had been applied to it by fashionable writers of the terror school like Horace and Mrs. Radcliffe, and he also invested it instead with the air of sedation and indefiniteness which gives the highest potency to it in its effect of imagination. He went directly to the supernatural and made it artistic use, to create the spirit of romance which is strange wedded to beauty. With Wordsworth, he had a program and a literary manifesto in Preface to Lyrical Ballads, in which he expressed his intention of supernaturalizing the nature. That is, he intended to present the supernatural in such a way that it would appear to be natural. Indeed, a very central aspect of his art lies in his faculty of evoking the mystery of things. Gifted with a very powerful imagination, he knows how to handle that species of the supernatural whose essence is entirely psychological. And it is this which constitutes, in a great measure, to develop romanticism in his works. Even after being such a reputed and most appreciated writer or poet, Coleridge had few defects in his career. First one being the fragmentary work. Coleridge is more noteworthy for what he suggested to others than for what he did in himself. His poetry is, even more than Wordsworth's, unequal. He is capable of large tracts of dreariness and flatness. He seldom finished what he began. The Ancient Mariner, indeed, which was a fruit of his close companionship with Wordsworth, is the only complete thing of the highest quality in the whole work done in his life. Christabel is a splendid fragmented work of his. For years the first part lay uncompleted, and when the odd accident of his evening's intoxication led him to begin the second, the inspiration had already fled. For the second part, by giving to the fairy atmosphere at the first a location and name, robbed it of its most precious quality. What it gave in exchange was something the public could not get from him, but got it better from Scott. Kubla Khan went unfinished because the call of a friend broke the thread of the reverie in which it was composed. In the end, Coleridge became addicted to opium, and this fouled the springs of poetry. Coleridge never fulfilled the promise of his early days with Wordsworth. He never spoke out, but it is on the lines that laid down by his share in which the pioneer worked rather than on the lines of Wordsworth's that the second generation of romantic poets, Shelley and Keats, developed. Then there is the lack of human interest in his work. When we try Coleridge's poetry in its relations to the world of human action passion, sensation, and thoughts, we seem forced to admit that despite all its power and beauty, at no moment it succeeds in convincing us. The poetry of Coleridge is deficient in human interest. His poetry leaves too much of the feeling of walk through a fine country on a misty day. We may have had many peep at beautiful scenery and occasional glimpses of the sublime, but the medium of vision has been of variable quality. So somehow we come home with an uneasy suspicion that we have not seen as much as we might. Coleridge had a very flitting poetic impulse. His poetic works like the political or politico-religious odes were the offspring of youthful democratic enthusiasm, the supernatural poems, so to call them for want of a better name, had their origin in an almost equally youthful and more than equally transitory passion for the wild and wondrous. Political delusion is fatal to the one impulse, and mere advance in years extinguishes the order of vision of the ancient mariner and Christabel, which does not revisit the mature man, and the tourism of middle life will hardly inspire odes to anything. Coleridge's poetry had wonderful music. Coleridge, with all his defects, is a singer always, as Wordsworth is not always, and Byron is never a singer. He is endowed with a glorious gift of song. If a critic like Swinburne seems to speak in exaggerated praise of Coleridge's lyrics, we can well understand their enchantment for a master of music like himself. Probably it was the same feeling which made Shelley describe France as the finest ode of English language. Well, these were his few defects of his career, which actually did not stop him from being famous, but did stop him from becoming what he actually could have been. So there was a thorough influence of Wordsworth's work on Coleridge's poetry. The meeting of Wordsworth and Coleridge in 1797 was an event of outstanding importance in the history of English poetry. Coleridge was residing near Alfoxden, where Wordsworth settled with his sister Dorothy. The Wordsworths came to meet Coleridge, and soon there sprang up a friendship between Coleridge and the Wordsworths. Some change in Coleridge is attributable to Wordsworth's influence upon him. Coleridge was by nature unsteady and also rambling in his speculations. It was Wordsworth who checked his rambling tendency and helped him as well as encouraged him to concentrate on his poetic energy along with a definite channel. And again, Wordsworth's philosophy of nature influenced him and colored to some extent his natural poetry, which revealed deeper insight and perception. His earlier nature poets had descriptions of sights and sounds of nature, although the details have a beauty of their own. They are not harmonized into lyrical unity by the stress of emotion which was later seen. The later group of nature poems show a deeper sense of calm and more contemplating mood. Above all, a consciousness of unity pervading the universe, of a spirit operating everywhere, or we can say, at once the soul of each and God of all. Coleridge did not fully and unreservedly accepted Wordsworth's philosophy of nature. According to Wordsworth, nature lives her own life and heals and soothes a man's sorrow and suffering. But Coleridge opposes this sort of view of Wordsworth. Nature for Coleridge was cold and inanimate. If any glory or joy is to be found in her, it is due to the reflective mind of a man, and not the quality present in her. but Coleridge and Wordsworth revolted against the artificial poetic diction in 18th century. Coleridge did not wholly subscribe to Wordsworth's theory. He would not give any importance to rustic speech, nor would he accept the dictum that there is no essential difference between the language of prose and metrical composition. To Coleridge, the language of poetry was distinct from that of prose. The best poetry of Coleridge was ultimately his own. It was not influenced from Wordsworth at all. Coleridge's genius found its own way and attained its fullest and most poetic expressions in the Ancient Mariner, Christabel, and Kubla Khan. So then Coleridge possessed the most vigorous mind among the elder English romantics. In some of his pieces, he is their most exquisite poet, but his work, his life, and even his thoughts are marked by an unhappy fate which prevented him from reaching complete self-fulfillment. His nervous energy was unable to cope up with an intellectual and artistic ambition which demanded the most exacting efforts for its fulfillment. He became a slave of opium and to a deep-set disease of his own personality from which he never recovered. His earlier poetry, as the poet himself acknowledges in his work Biographia Literaria, is full of faults, being rhetorical, diffuse, and harsh in diction and rhythm. However, he grew and all his deficiencies were gone. He produced a few selected pieces like the Ancient Mariner or the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, Christabel, Kubla Khan, and Love, which have taken their place among most appreciated masterpieces in English poetry, which the world will not willingly let die. So this is all on Coleridge, and this was the last chapter of the course. The lesson was an overview of Coleridge's life and career. I hope you got it. If you have any doubts or any questions, you can comment and keep following me on Unacademy. Thanks a lot.